I've never actually solicited for help, but this video is actually for you guys who've been working uh, through Cornell University, BaptistLamp.org, Lamp Theological Institute, I'm Cornell.org, all of our classes, the Cornell project. The interest now is how would we approach calculating the odds of such things, since the Hebrew language, you've heard of Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew. And that's usually just referring to the one of three forms. It's pictographic. So that's an interesting thing. So if the language was derived originally from a picture form, we know that it was also numeric. For example, Aleph, the first letter, equals 1 and also 1,000. Quite remarkable. And then 3, of course, it's phonetic, as we would know it when people speak or converse or maybe read aloud. So what were the odds that between the disparate numbers that we have of a 6,250-year-old Earth and a 4.5 billion year age? So the question is, what were the odds? And again, let me refer to a few things. When I took a class called The Psychology of Religion at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and my trifocals aren't helping, so just a moment. Okay, I guess I've got it close enough. In the book, The Psychology of Religion, an Empirical Approach, written by an author last name Hood and another author last name Spilka, 2009, they said they noticed beyond high IQs demonstrable expressions of a genetic advantage presently materialized. That is, demonstrable, could be measured. They measured IQs. High IQs would be meaningless if they were not manifested in concrete accomplishments in life. They quoted Stark in 1998, claims that the Jews rapidly became the most highly educated group in the United States and have the highest family income of any racial, religious, or ethnic group. Further evidence is found in the Nobel Prize winners. From the second half of the 20th century up to 2004, the Jewish population accounted for 2 to 3%, but they accounted for 41% of those receiving Nobel Prizes. And that's on page 70 of Stark's, or in Hood's work, 2009. Concerning nuclear weaponry, one can observe a direct correlation. A notable member of this nation of Israel, these Hebrews, Oppenheimer, he's considered the father of the atomic bomb. Edward Teller is considered the father of the hydrogen bomb. Another person we all would recognize his name, Albert Einstein, wrote about his theories of relativity. And the conclusion was the fact that these Jewish scientists afforded the U.S. collateral benefits directly extended protections from what we now know in the Western world. Collateral benefits, we now have global benefits from missile defense systems, so missile guidance systems, all the technology, and they all came from people who had a background in this ancient Oriental language that originated, some say the original form was pictographic, and then numeric values began to be assigned or attributed, and then of course a language. Now all three of these features make it a unique language, but what are the odds? How would I, for example, and anyone out there could help us, And those of you that avail yourselves of these videos, look up how to calculate the odds that this Hebrew, it's called Hebrew language, biblical Hebrew specifically, but this language that's ancient, let's say 3,500 years ago recorded, what are the odds that in its Hebrew text a ratio that 1 to 1,000 would fit, and then a 360 day lunar year, that this actually had a correlation, that a correlative reality can be demonstrated. What are the odds of that? Because, for example, in the Old Testament as well, this language spoke of people working 6 days. That would be 12 hours. Well, if that 6 days they worked only counted 12 hours for a day, then the 6 hours at night would place us at another 6,250. So if we looked at that as volume, and just, it's very elementary, but you add this together to get 12,000. My grandbabies have been playing with my markers. So you have 12,500 total years as far as time. So probably 12,500 years. Multiply that by 360 days. This one day here as 1,000 years. And that gives 4.5 million days. And then, of course, using that a day, you can now change the units. Then you multiply it by 1,000 years, just add 3 zeros, gives you 4.5 billion. This times 1,000 years equals 4.5 billion years. What were the odds of that? And that's what I'm more interested in. Like, I know there's YouTube channels, one's named Numberphile, where they do some unusual things. Our research is in light of the ancient nature of those languages in the biblical Hebrew text, and the fact that they came from such basic pictures. For example, the first letter, Aleph, is the design of it now is from a caricature of an ox head. So how could something so base, so basic, become a letter, and then it be one of the few languages that has these 3 features, and then correlative observations can be made, and then the hinges upon which our history has turned were people whose history had roots in this language. So we have an Einstein, a Teller, and an Oppenheimer, where the entire Western world as we know it today turned on these 3 men, as if you will, in metaphor, 3 hinges. And we have observations of IQ levels per 1,000 among Hebrew people, genetically speaking, that finds more of them per 1,000 at a 140 and above IQ. So it's quite remarkable. But how to calculate the odds of that? That's just an assignment, something I would be really interested in. Any of you in the audience, those of you out there, work on that, because Dr. John Penn, hermeneutics professor, Missionary Baptist Seminary, he was aware of these, or this formula in the Bible. He was more than convinced of it, and he made it really easy for me. All I had to do is plug in the numbers, but he said use that 360 days. So he stayed with the text, and then he noticed and brought my attention to the fact that 6 days and rest on the 7th was referring to 12 hours. Well, if you think of time as volume, which it wasn't difficult for him to do, then it just fell into place that 12,500, and where I began in trial and error, or plug and chug, if you will, was people argue anywhere from 6 to 20,000. Well, 7,000's the difference. Well, 14's the difference. So I split it by 7 and then began to do my work start at 6,000 and then to get to 7,000, which all I did was split the difference between 6 and 20. Well, I broke this into 4 and would be 250 each. Well, as soon as I came to the first one, I said, okay, let's try 6,250. And then that's when he reminded me these were 12 hours each. So you have to have that insight, and he does, and studied enough to be able to do that. But I really like anyone's help, not in questioning this. This is just to demonstrate a correlative reality, certainly not opening debates as much as trying to determine what would the odds be. How would you calculate the odds of such a language coming from pictures like an ox head that became a letter that acquired a numeric value and a sound, and these were this language had these 3 features, and yet thousands of years ago it had knowledge or a correlative connection with one of the largest disputes in the world as we know it today, between the age dating of the earth. And young earthers have quite a claim to demonstrate that the text we use, we call our Bible, the Old Testament, certainly seems to have had a knowledge that can be demonstrated, that the Bible is aware of the fact time's not linear, it's aware of relativity, and we have historical figures as notable as Einstein, Teller, and Oppenheimer, where we have, I guess, well, what we would call, not I guess, but what we would call the difference that was essential in assuring what we have today as far as national defense, global defense, and all these proprietary, I suppose, this proprietary knowledge that safeguarded and used properly assures safety when they could be so much otherwise disastrous. But how would we calculate the odds? Help me out if you can. Those of you that know how to crunch numbers or add in all the factors and come up with combinatorics or something, just how do we calculate the odds? I would love to know what type of odds. It seems astronomical, to say the least about it. So you have a good day, and feedback welcome.